us about the owl. If you were going to tell me about the owl, I would love to hear about the owl
So,
behind.
so my late paternal grandfather, who passed away in, I believe, 1962, 12 years before I was born, he was a game warden here in Pennsylvania. And he evidently encountered this owl at one point, and it was deceased, and he had it mounted.
Wow.
Although, who knows? Maybe it wasn't deceased. Anyhow, it's a white snowy owl, and it's
Wow.
filthy. It's filthy, and it needs to be cleaned. But nobody will clean it because it's illegal to mount endangered species or protected species.
Even though it was a
Well,
while
they don't
back.
want to even be caught with it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But this was probably done in the 1940s.
Yeah.
So even I've showed it to taxidermists, and they said, yeah, it's an old mount. But I'm not touching it because if I get caught, that's a fine for me and a fine for you. And
you don't mind that you're publicly showing everyone who watches this that you have this behind your head?
I have. If they come and find me, we're going to have to find a sponsor. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Deal.
All right, John, I just want to briefly introduce you, and all I really know about you is that I met you at a party of some friends who I really adore. I thought you're very interesting, that you're very interested in the feminine face of God, and that your name is John von Blauch, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You pronounced it correct, and with that German diphthong, it comes from the word blau, blue, which is the word for blue, blau, and ja, jawohl, genau. Ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch.
Deutsch ist mein dritte
Sprache.
Meine dritte, Sprache. Ich habe es für viele Jahre studiert. Ich habe in Bad Kissingen, als ich 9 Jahre alt war, gewohnt. Can't believe I did that correctly. More or less correctly. Because there's a lot of verbs there that are moving around, you know.
Oh.
Und auch habe ich in der Uni studiert für viele Jahre. Aber ich habe niemals Deutsch used in the last 30 years.
Pues lo que te voy a decir es que me cuesta más de hablar en alemán que en español, porque el alemán era mi idioma segunda.
Y español era el primero.
La tercera. Pero estaba hablando...
¿Inglés fue primero?
Sí. So, yeah, you girls, ladies, sorry. Okay,
Women,
I got a question.
Mujeres.
Mujeres.
This is actually a useful topic to get into.
Yes, especially about the feminine face of God.
Have we finished the owl thing?
Yeah, we finished the owl thing.
So,
we finished.
So I'm Puerto Rican. That's my heritage. And
yes.
But I have lived in Texas for many, many years. So I have a strong affinity for Texas and Mexican-American culture as well. Anyway, my cousins were here, live here, and I had out-of-town friends. And we were listening to the great tradition of bolero music. If you're familiar with Trio Los Panchos, Trio Los Reyes.
My father loves that music.
Oh, I adore it. My mother loved it. Anyway, in that music, there's a lot of love songs. And what comes up in many songs is this habit that, I don't know if Iberians have this habit, but Caribbean Spanish have this habit of using the word negro and negra as terms of endearment.
Never heard that in Spain.
Are you familiar? So I will say, a song will say, "Oh, I miss you so much, negra."
Negra.
The black one. Yeah. But the person may not be black. It is like my cousins who are pretty fair. You will often hear each other say, instead of babe or honey, they'll use negra or negro. So I need someday to read up on that because I don't know of any other culture that does that.
That's really interesting. So that's like a reverse
Caribbean,
of the usual.
Perhaps South American, Central American, Hispanic cultures. And then on this, what do you call people of our sex, gender? I don't know what the right word to use is. But
yo que sé. Yo que sé.
Yo que sé. Yeah. So you can say girls, but that gets into this thing of calling a 70-year-old person a girl. And do you do it to boys? Do you do it, hey boys,
Would you say it to Elon Musk?
say guys way more often than you say boys in
Right.
this context.
Yeah.
And gals is actually better than girls.
I agree.
You'll come in if you disagree. Ladies also, for some reason,
I know. It gives me the
has
tweaks.
has a connotation of excessive femininity. That's how I would characterize it,
Yeah.
or
Ooh.
perhaps not excessive, but
I'm getting performance anxiety now. Okay, I just want you to.
So that's the thing, is that
Right.
talking about this, like, I wouldn't want to talk about this with someone who, well, I don't think we would even be willing to talk about this with someone who wouldn't get it. Like, so the reason
Yes,
we're
of
talking about
course.
this is because we know that you get it, but it's not like we know the answer. It's just that we're
Yeah.
talking about what happens in our heads with these words for whatever reason. And it's not
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and it's
yeah,
like
it's
socially
not like you're wrong or
constructed, and
anyone's wrong. It's just like, this
yeah,
is what happens.
yeah,
Like a lady, I think of a Southern gentlewoman with her curtsy.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
kind of nice, um, but then I would want to call all men gentlemen. It's just sort of like, is there an equivalence is what goes on in my
yeah.
mind
And I
because,
think in Spanish we do say hombres y mujeres.
yeah,
Por supuesto. And in
Por supuesto.
Spain, I say, oye, hola, chicas,
Oh,
nenas,
hola, oh,
niñas,
chica, chica is a
chicas, oye, chica,
oh yeah,
venga.
and that
that's
has
great.
a different meaning than girl. It's a better word than girl
It's
for
that my sister calls me Chica all the time.
uh-huh.
I love Chica,
But
because it's just like, hey, chickadee or something. Yeah.
yeah. Do you like Chiquitita? I mean, the song from ABBA.
Oh
You
yeah, that
remember
is
that?
the, yeah, of course. I
I'm
do.
sorry. What was that
This
reference?
is a ABBA
Chiquitita.
song, Chiquitita.
Oh
Yes.
yeah,
Chiquitita, dime por
chica. Well,
qué.
yes. Well,
Yeah, yeah. Tell me why.
I mean,
Yeah. So I grew up with my father. I was born in 74. My father was listening to ABBA music. And so I learned all these ABBA songs. And then I went to Czechoslovakia in
Wow.
1992 to teach English as a second language in a private English school. And I went to a discotheque. It was called the Tropicana. And guess what they played? ABBA music.
uh,
ABBA and Enigma. Can you imagine that?
That's an interesting
ABBA
mix.
and Queen. Queen.
Yes.
Queen. Yeah, so it was quite something. But no, yeah, the thing about gals. So let me ask you this, gals. Why do adults say, "Where's the little girl's room?" or "Where's the little boy's room?" I need to use little girl's
oh
room.
yeah. Why do
Because
That
they're so when people are a little bit embarrassed because we
uh,
we we make the bathroom an embarrassing place to go. My husband and I make fun of that by calling toilet paper shame paper. Like, I have to get more shame paper because we're almost out. But like,
or you
so it's like when you're a little bit embarrassed, then you kind of make fun of yourself
uh-huh.
and sort of
yeah,
take
I
away
think
anything embarrassing by calling it the little girls or little boys, right?
you're
Okay.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, so there's a funny little anecdote from my life in Spain. So, in Spanish, the word beber is the infinitive to drink, right?
Yeah.
Bebo, yo bebo.
Uh-huh.
So when people would need to use the bathroom in bars, they would say, "Me voy a desbeber."
Oh,
Desbeber.
you're
I'm
gonna
going to go
undrink.
undrink.
You're
I'm
gonna
going to
go
go
undrink. Yes.
That is
undrink.
fantastic. I like that a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. So it was a very dear friend of mine. He's passed on many years ago. His name was Henry Frauci, and he says, "Damn it, John, it's desbeber." And so that's what vamos a desbeber.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
Okay.
taking a leak in English. I'm
Yeah.
going to take, like, I'm
exactly.
leaking.
The leaking. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So Henry
Um,
had a remarkable ability because he really had a good understanding of a lot of the colloquialisms in Spanish, and he played with them. And it was kind of neat. For example, he would also do a lot of word plays. Like, for example, John, did the macho come today? The macho, as opposed meaning the male, okay, macho and hembra, male, female. He would say, "Did the macho come? Did you get the macho yet in the office?" And I'm like, as opposed to the hembra. He said, yeah. He said, although we had an hembra for the mailman, we had a lady, so we could. But anyway, be that as it may.
John, can I get
Hey,
you too? Because can I get you? Because I want to see your shoulders. Can you tilt your camera a little? Oh, there. Oh,
and
yeah.
then if you lean back, that's
It's
much better.
fine. Yeah,
That's much
that's
better.
great. Thanks.
so I have an issue. I don't sit still very long, and in
That's
photographs,
great.
like when I'm in photos, there was like movement all the time,
Yeah.
and so I
Well,
don't
on
know.
our show, we call it the daguerreotype show. So for about 20 minutes, you just have to do this. Is that okay?
Did the timer start? Did the timer? It's a delight to see you both. It really is.
Oh, oh,
I
igualmente.
Yeah, see.
because no, but seriously, I was really impressed with that little social gathering that we were at back on the 21st of January, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes.
I,
Well,
yeah,
so and so what brought you to that? I mean, so just so our audience knows, we were talking about edge science.
mm-hmm.
And what, I mean, if you could tell us a little bit, like if I were to introduce you more formally, what would I say? Would I say anything different than what I said in terms of what
No.
your background is or what your work is, or was that correct?
So I don't know what you said exactly. Did I miss what you said about me?
I
That my
said that
name?
this is your name and that you're
That's it.
very into the feminine face of God.
I'm into a lot of things, and yes. So what brought me? Francisco and Ana are very, very dear friends of mine. I've known. I I encountered Francisco in the early 2000s in Madrid as a result of sort of a network of people, but I reacquainted myself with him in 2010 in Boston. I was up in New England for a meeting, and he happened to be there. And Francisco and Ana and I share a lot of interests in what we would describe as perhaps the esoteric. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And I've had some experiences with what they refer to now as the phenomena in my own personal life. And some of those things I've shared with them. And that they were very compelling testimonies.
For our listeners, we're talking about unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Anomalous phenomena, exactly. Yeah. And what they're calling now NHI, non-human intelligence, which is really fascinating.
Right.
You know, the words.
And have had you experience with that?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, yes, so I don't like that phraseology because like whales are not human intelligence.
And they may be even more intelligent than us, actually, when it comes
exactly. And so it's sort of like, what do we really mean?
Yeah, what do we really mean?
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling. A lot of times I tell people, I don't care what you think. Tell me what you feel. Okay. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that NHI, non-human intelligence, is too generic of a term because we experience that for those people who are religious, who are spiritual, as well as people who run into what we used to call UFOs or have these peculiar experiences. Yeah, they are non-human for all intents and purposes. However, I learned something very interesting, and I don't know if this is factual, but I heard from somebody that some of the non-human intelligences might actually be time travelers. And that's your wheelhouse, kid. That is your time travel. Yeah, Chica. That's your wheelhouse, Julia.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So is it Julia down by the schoolyard? That song? Do you remember that?
Me and Julio.
Be it Julio.
Yeah. So the best song for Julia that I can just tell you, there's multiple Julia songs. One's by Eurythmics. It's from the 1984 soundtracks. One is by the Beatles on the White Album. I don't like either of those. The best one is Robert Palmer's Hey, Hey, Julia.
Robert Palmer. Oh, what?
Yeah. I'll put that on the Pandas playlist. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I've never been in. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just because I know that your mind, then you combined your mind with our minds, and the conversation is going to be like this. But I want to track on some things that I know our listeners will be interested in us tracking on.
Is that called field propagation?
Every once in a while, I'll come in here and pull a thread.
Yeah, Carmen will be like, "What about this?" But I want to like drill down on this NHI thing, whatever you call them. I think that in general, UAP people are thinking of them as aliens, even though they might not be extraterrestrial. They might be extratemporal, like Michael Masters talks about, right?
Yes.
Or they might be extra dimensional, but they're sort of not on the planet right here, right now with us, but they sort of are. I mean, it's very confusing. And I'm curious what your experience has, if you've had any like direct experience with that.
Yes, absolutely. But something I wanted to say was, I believe Hal Puthoff refers to them also as possibly ultra-dimensional, ultra-terrestrial, pardon me, ultra-terrestrial.
Right. So they could be right here, but they have been here like even before we were, and et cetera.
Before we get into that, or how we get into that, I always question everything. I have a sign on the door out here that says "Why not?" It's written in symbols, but anyway, why not? I ask constantly why, and I also, and I don't mean to sound like a skeptic, but I always try and maybe you know this, Carmen, is it counterintelligence? I try to take the opposite side. I try to play the devil's
No,
advocate.
usually they call that usually call it like red teaming when you
Yeah,
on
red
purpose
teaming.
or devil's advocate on purpose take and make the best case for the other side.
That may lead into something I shared with you, chicas, at
Gal is
Francisco.
okay. Gal is okay.
I don't want you to have like an adverse reaction to speaking, so you should do what you want.
Exactly.
Uh, hey, like I said, last week I was on a podcast with Hal Puthoff and Diana Pasulka and Anna. And
oh yeah, this is a NASA podcast. She told me about that.
yeah,
We can link to it when it comes out on this.
I don't know if it's going to come out because I'll tell you what, I talk about performance anxiety and I had no idea going in there. But anyway, the most interesting part of the conversation on my behalf, I think, occurred in the green room after after it ended. But hey, it's all wonderful. That's why I liked what you chicas, you gals do. It's sort of go with the flow, and that I get. So
exactly. And the flow is like surfing.
Oh yeah, surfing. Although I have a terrible fear of sharks, but justifiably so. But
it's
anyway,
okay. There are no sharks here.
There are none. Oh, that's good.
No.
Well, that's something interesting because I think I shared when I was. I know I shared when I was at that lovely evening when I met both of you. I talked about back in 2008. I was doing some consulting work in Spain, and there was a man by the name of. Tell me if I can say this. His name, he's passed on. He was a colonel, a U.S. military.
You just go ahead and say it, and then later, if it turns out we can't say it, we'll edit it out.
Okay, so his name was Colonel John Dramisi, and he had been at the Hanoi Hilton with the late John McCain, and he had gone through some pretty horrible things. In fact, he showed me, he had some issues with his legs. He showed me some of the scars of what he had gone through. He had been brutally tortured. And he had also crashed his plane. But anyway, John Dramisi had developed an aircraft, which curiously today I believe is now being used or it's being experimented with, and it went beyond the speed of sound. And he had come up with this idea that this craft, which had a really terrible sonic footprint, but this aircraft could travel around the world, let's say Paris to Paris, in something like 4 hours and 20 minutes. And he had come to the conclusion that if people can look eye to eye, face to face with people and experience that entanglement that occurs, the world would be a better place. And he was talking about diplomats and leaders. People wouldn't push buttons. People wouldn't do certain things if they could get in front of each other when tensions were running high. So he had invented this craft, and he had come to Spain with a team of people to talk about possibly manufacturing components of it. And it was given permission to do this in the private sector, to my understanding, obviously. And what I did is I helped translate and helped schmooze, okay, if you will. And in the process, we went to an old, I wouldn't call it a church, it's a temple outside of Segovia in Spain. And it's called Veracruz, True Cross. And the story is that on one hand, it had a piece of the so-called True Cross in it, and that was considered a relic, so it was given the name Veracruz. Another story is it was called the Holy Sepulchre Church. But anyway, this church, and this is where you were inspired to share something with me about the wall, Julia. This church is, in my opinion, it was built by the Knights Templars, and it has certain technologies, architecturally speaking. And, I'm not a scientist, but it is built over what they would describe as certain energetic lines and their nexus point. And it has a chamber that is a dodecahedron chamber. Where? Yeah. You see where this is going. Yeah.
I don't know what that word means, so
It's a 12-sided shape, if I'm not mistaken,
oh, I
right?
see.
Buckminster Fuller geodesic dome
Yeah.
worships
Yes.
this. Yes.
Yes, and there was a podcast with several of them just passed away 2 weeks ago tomorrow. I think his name was Robert Gilbert. He had the Vasić Institute, and he talked about how when he was trained in nuclear management or post-nuclear weapons detonation management and things like this, when he was in the Marine Corps, that one of the things that he learned was that I think the original atom bomb was in the shape of a dodecahedron, correct? Is that what that
I
was
don't
in
know.
White Plains, New Mexico?
I don't know.
I don't know,
So
but
White
it could
Sands,
be.
White Sands.
White Sands.
White Sands,
White
White
Sands,
Sands, White,
yeah.
White Sands. Thank you. It's your neighborhood, White Sands. So he also talked about the fact that in the Pythagorean school, sacred geometry, that the dodecahedron was sacrosanct. It was not something that was discussed. It was something reserved only for high-level initiates who had a certain character and quality about their persona. In other words, I think they were rooted in universal love, because something about the dodecahedron, it's a powerful shape. So anyway, in this dodecahedron chamber, there's some odd things that occur. One, it has an acoustical phenomena where you can literally hear yourself in a deafening silence. And this goes back to my experience with UAPs. Experienced the same thing. But anyway, I'm throwing a lot out here. John Dramisi went in this chamber and he became overwhelmed emotionally. He teared up and he came out visibly disturbed. And we went outside and we sat down and he said, do you believe in God? And I said, well, I take the take of Jung. It's not a question of belief. I know God exists, experientially speaking. And he said, wow. He said, well, I didn't for the longest time until what just happened in there. And then he proceeded to tell me some of the tragedies of his life that he went through during the Vietnam War and how his Catholic faith sustained him, and how throughout his life, he was raised Roman Catholic, he was born in Philadelphia, Italian-American family. He described how when something occurred, and he referred to it as disclosure, and he had disclosure. And I thought that this was some kind of term related to closure, like some kind of therapy. He had closure on something, and that's when he stopped believing in God. And then he told me that when he was on the red team, Carmen, when he was on the red team, and he described certain agencies and things, he said he was confronted with the reality of the existence of these things. And he said
these things being non-human intelligence?
Yes, and I guess craft. He described them as beings, extraterrestrial beings that could wipe us out, that could destroy us. They have control, and he said that at that point he could no longer believe in the Sunday school simple God that he was taught about, this God of love who created humanity, sent Jesus as its only begotten son, so forth and so on, blah blah blah. And he said no, because a truly loving God, we can get into that, would not create hostile and potentially predatory life forms off this planet or from elsewhere. He said just wouldn't do it. Not the God that I believed in. And he said at that moment, I lost all belief in God. And I'm going to try and be efficient about this because girls, I can natter on. gals, I can add her on. He said that he was curious about my experiences, and we talked about those. And he asked me what I was reading. It was a book called Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, and it was by a man by the name of Eckarthausen, who was sort of a mystical theologian from the 18th century. And Los Nubes sobre el Santuario, The Clouds Upon the Sanctuary. And actually, it was, I think, Rudolf Steiner's widow who translated it into English. But anyway, he asked if he could borrow the book, and I said yes. But he explained to me that when he was in that chamber, that dodecahedron, that he felt like he had been surrounded by what he described as this woman, this mother. And he said, I felt like what must feel like to be in the womb. But he said, I was just surrounded by love. And he said, and he referred to the Blessed Mother. And I believe Chris Bledsoe down in North Carolina, he experiences some kind of lady, etc. And going back to, the term you used about negra or negro, the Templars had they brought out of allegedly Egypt these Madonnas, these statues, which are called the Black Virgins, La Virgen Negra. And you can find these throughout Spain. And some people say it's Isis and so forth. But anyway, Colonel Dramisi described this experience as encountering the Blessed Mother. That's not what he could describe it as. And he said that changed everything for him. Now, this had just happened like 5 minutes, 10 minutes before. But he had a completely different affect. And I believe, Julia, you had mentioned something when you went to the wall in Jerusalem. What was that, 3 years ago? Or when was it?
2023. Yeah, no, it was the only time I've ever been to Israel was on Rosh Hashanah. And it was an impromptu trip, which is not like me. And I was invited to go to an Israeli new friend's house in Jerusalem. So for Rosh Hashanah. So I did, because I thought, when am I going to go to Israel? And it's Rosh Hashanah. And so on Rosh Hashanah, I woke up on the day of, so after the evening, I woke up early and decided to walk to the Western Wall. Never been there before. I didn't read anything about it. I just followed GPS, which of course you're not supposed to really be doing. But anyway, I followed GPS to get there because it's like in Rosh Hashanah it's like the Shabbat of all Shabbats, right?
Okay,
so, yeah. But anyway, I was like looking at my GPS and I walked inappropriately through like both the men's area and the Arab quarter.
Okay. I thought you were going to say that the area for the chicas. Oh, that's what I was.
Yeah, no, I walked in. I'm like, I keep walking because I'm following GPS, and it's like, go this way, and I'm like, all right. And I'm looking around.
The Arab quarter is really a fantastic quarter in
exactly. So I got lost there because and then I had to ask someone like, hey, I'm going for the Western Wall. They're like, oh, you're in the Arab quarter. Go this way. So I got there. I had my hat on, of course. At least I do that. So I'm on the women's side. And I decide to pray. I hope it's okay that I'm telling this story, but it's totally related to the feminine face of God thing. Yeah, so I go up there and I hit the wall, and I already had in my pockets prayers for family and friends that I was going to put in the wall, right? I was prepared. And so I started putting them in the wall, and then I just decided I'm just going to pray. And I started praying and nothing. I didn't feel anything. And so I was like, wait a minute. And then I backed up. I sat down and I said, I'm just going to wait until I feel something. Like inspired. So then I did, and I went back up to the wall and I folded my hat around me. So it felt like a personal appointment with the wall. Like
the space.
There's like, I am right here with the wall. I had my hands on the wall with my hat around me, put my forehead on the wall, and then I felt it. And I was like, oh, it was this deeply feminine. And the Hebrew phrase,
Shekinah.
That was later. I knew the phrase Shekinah. The Hebrew phrase kirim.
Kirim, yeah.
The wall of the womb.
And
I didn't know what that meant, but that came to me, and I was like, holy shit, and I just started sobbing. and and it was holy shit. It was.
Or I thought you said holy shin, but anyway.
No, it could have been holy shit. That would have been like, but no, I was like, it was a
Kind
powerful.
of.
It was like a badass. This is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
badass feminine experience, and it was powerful, most powerful experience of my life in terms of meeting with God. And a prayer came into my heart, which is, can I bring this essence into the world of men? Is really what the prayer was. And it came into my heart. Like, I didn't say it with my mind. Like, my heart was saying, please let me bring this essence into the world of men. And then I backed away, and that was a mess. So yeah, it
How are
was
you
really,
doing with that?
and
I
then
think
later,
you gals are doing that, but how are you doing with that? Please.
working on it. But I backed away, and that's when I read the thing that further back that said, oh, by the way, many people consider this the place of the Shekinah, the feminine spirit of God. And I didn't know that, but I felt it, and I was like, oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, and I'm getting goosebumps when you told me at Francisco and Anna's. I refer to them affectionately now as Franas. At Franas, I was really moved when you told me this, and yeah, the feminine. This is, you said something, Julia, about the need for this in the world. And this is part of your mission. And respectfully, I can tell that you gals are both formidable individuals. And that's very, very important. Because going back to what you're talking to me about, referring to someone as a lady or a girl, you're right. The feminine is people ask about God's love, and I don't want to anthropomorphize God, but if we think of God's love, wouldn't a mother's love for their child be the closest equivalent? Because that is the matrix. That's literally what that chamber is, by the way, in Vera Cruz. We all ought to go there someday.
Yeah.
Seriously. I'm not joking.
I'm not joking either.
Well, actually, I should be there in about 6 weeks. So
Oh,
in
I thought you were in
Seville. So
Guatemala. Oh, you've got back from there. Yes.
I've done that. You.
I know.
Yes. So anyway, but I should be in Seville in about 6 weeks. So.
Oh, this is Segovia, dear. This is going to be
Segovia.
Segovia.
Oh, Segovia.
Segovia. You know where the aqueducts are?
Oh, I thought because when you look it up, there is such a place in Seville too.
Really?
Well, at least I think it was.
Wait a minute. If we mapped the
Oh no, you're right. It is the Iglesia de la Veracruz, and I
Okay.
had been there several times in Segovia. I had been to that one several times.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
you need to go back in that chamber. We need to organize a trip, and with Dr. Pasulka and anybody else in Frana, we need to do that. In fact, that's something we talked about. But this love of God, God's love, is. You're a mother, Julia, if I recall correctly. You were talking about your son having an experience and then talking about it, weeks after the fact, and how kids' brains work, right? You were saying that, there's a delay, or how did you put it?
Oh, I don't know how I put it, but there's sort of, I can't speak to my son's experience because that's private to him, but he had an experience with parent NHI, and he was telling me everything at that age, and he didn't tell me, and it felt like an enforced forgetting.
Fascinating. My parents tell a story that when I was 2 years old, I was born in Reading. When I was 2 years old, my mother's father took me out in a little wagon to the Halloween parade, and evidently I fell out. And 2 years later, I told my parents out of the blue, "Hey, I fell out of the wagon with Paul." What? And they contacted him, and they were all upset. And he was like, "No, that happened 2 years ago." It was. So my parents always say it's sort of that wagon scenario. They call me JR. He never tells us things right after they happen. He waits forever to tell us. But I'm still doing that at 51 years old.
Well, so what was your experience with NHI, and was it like this feminine face of God experience? Or do you not want to share it? It's okay if you don't want to share it.
No, I would like to share. I would like to share several things, but I did want to say something more about Vera Cruz. So Vera Cruz, I belong to a a Masonic lodge in Madrid that was made up primarily, it was a US, Anglo-American, French military lodge.
So are you in
And
Madrid right now, or where are you anyway?
I'm in Lebanon, Pennsylvania
Oh,
is the
you're in
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
I'm in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. But if you're from this area, it's the word Lebanon is what you use. That's the shibboleth to determine whether or not you're a native or not. But
Um,
I'm in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, which is very close by Hershey, and it's, as I said, this past summer in a speech I gave at my university in Madrid, I said it's the only island surrounded by land that I know of. But anyway, that's where I am right now. And what one of the fellows in the lodge uh, told me that he had worked, he was former military and some other thing. And he had told me that he was involved in a project back in the 1970s at Vera Cruz with EG&G, I believe it was, where they studied the phenomena there and the electromagnetic
Oh, okay.
resonance
mm,
and the energetic shifts that occur and their effects on people. Now, how do I say this? It's not a question. I didn't believe him. I didn't know if he was telling me the truth,
mhm.
but I had already been there. I had already experienced something. So I don't know if the man had no reason to lie to me. So if he, E, G, and G or egg, I understand. This is curious. I Googled it. I Googled it recently, actually today. I Googled it because I thought I'd talk about it. And it said that they were responsible for building Area 51 in Nevada.
What does it stand for?
It's a series of names. You know, we can consult the Google God.
Oh,
Can you
those
do
are
that?
people. Those
I'm
are
doing that right now. I'm
those are
Yeah, yeah.
people.
consulting.
I thought it was like an agency that I'd never heard of, but those are initials of people.
Yeah, no, it's the name of the founders of the company. I think it was founded in the, what was it, 1920s or 30s, Carmen?
Edgerton,
Yeah,
Bermashausen, und Greer.
und
It
Greer.
was it was, according to this, a national defense contractor.
Mm.
And so it seems completely likely that it could have built unusual buildings.
Carmen,
Yeah,
do
it
you?
had close involvement with some of the government's most sensitive technologies.
Wow, never heard it. So question.
Yeah.
Um, Carmen, have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch?
Yes, I have
Yeah.
heard of Skinwalker Ranch. I've listened to several podcasts about Skinwalker Ranch. I think I've even seen a documentary. I know they had like a TV show,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost like a reality show
Yeah.
going on about it. I may have seen, I kind of remember seeing an episode of that.
So I feel like Skinwalker Ranch, the stuff that's going on there is like a calling out for the need for the sacred feminine. I mean, I feel like it's like this, like it's the almost the opposite of what's going on in that dodecahedron, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's sort of like the Earth sort of telling us. It'd be interesting to look at the geometric relationship between these sites, multiple sites, right? The
There are
Western
others.
Wall, the dodecahedron, Skinwalker Ranch, and just look at that through time and space, not just space, but through time and space, and see what that shows us. Because I think that it's sort of like the universe announcing itself, or the
Mhm.
divine announcing itself and saying like it's almost like a little hello. But I feel like there's something to do, right? It's like a message. Like this is incomplete. Like Skinwalker Ranch just seems like a bunch of stuff. Try not to swear. But it feels like there's a healing that can happen, and that healing could potentially, like the Washington Monument, I think is one of them, actually. It's also made of
Ah,
limestone like the Western Wall. And it just would
mhm.
be interesting to see if some kind of healing could happen with that that universal love.
Absolutely. So I know you traded the dome for the obelisk, So,
Yeah,
so
that's
just
not what you
so
said. He's saying that because I used to live in a geodesic dome, which I wanted to live in since I was a kid, and I recently sold it, and now I live near the Washington Monument, and so yeah, that's interesting. I didn't
yeah,
do it. I did it for not because I preferred the obelisk, but because it needed my help. Well, that's my theory.
well, you know, the obelisk is allegedly a phallic symbol, right? So
Of
Right.
course, yeah.
isn't that so?
Well,
Well,
I
you
liked
know,
it. A few years ago, it was being remodeled, refurbished. And so they had scaffolding all over
mhm.
it.
Yeah, I
And so
recall.
at night, the scaffolding looked like a plaid. So
Hmm.
I just found I was so attractive. You drove by it and it was wearing plaid. And I thought that was its best look ever. Much better than the sheer,
Yeah, no, it's not. It would be
white
nice.
phallic thing,
A
but
phallic
this
thing.
a plaid is friendlier.
Yeah, dress up your phallic symbol.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it St. Peter's in Rome? Isn't there a big plaza that's sort of like a circle with an obelisk in the
Yes, there
center?
Oh
is.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And I feel that these type of things, like for example in Veracruz and other Templar sites, curiously enough, um, are the womb. And I know they referred to this church as the Holy Sepulchre, but that's a whole other thing to unpack. But the idea, if I'm not mistaken, is that historically people were buried when they passed out of this physical existence, and their remains were buried in the earth because it was like returning it to the womb, correct?
Hmm.
Putting them back in the womb. And curiously, at Veracruz, there are anthropomorphic, almost like sarcophagi, carved in the stone right
Mm.
outside the church.
Mm.
And these are ancient, very, very, very ancient. I was talking to somebody once and they said, I think they buried aliens there and that's why they were exhumed. But anyway, I can send you gals pictures of these at some point via email. But anyway,
Like, what's in your heart that you would like to say in the last few minutes? Because I personally am very curious about your NHI experience, and I think that could help people who have those experiences process it. But also there may be something else you want to say. But I just want to know what's in your heart.
my NHI experience, the first one was I was a child,
Mm. How old?
probably five,
Mm.
4 or 5. And I sent you that sort of strange thing last night, but there was a part of it which described this sensation of that the child experienced about what if, mommy and daddy didn't exist? What if I don't exist? It was a complete lack of ego. That was my first experience with it. I was taken up. I thought I was floating,
Hmm.
and it was transcendental to say the least. But my brain was going through, what if language doesn't exist? What if mommy and daddy don't exist? What if all of these things don't exist? What am I? And
Hmm.
there was this sensation of initial dread. And
Hmm.
then there was this feeling of complete envelopment and complete security in
Mm.
this emptiness that my mind had created by basically saying these things don't exist, or what if they don't exist? And then the next occasion was on my eve before I departed for Czechoslovakia in August of 1992, and it was not far from here in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I had taken an exchange student out on a date, a Rotary exchange student, and I was coming back, and I saw this orb. That's exactly what it was. This thing out in the cornfield. But it wasn't really a cornfield because the corn wasn't growing, but it was a field. That was the strange thing. And I went out in, so we call it a cornfield around here, but it was obviously agricultural, but there was no corn in it. And I walked out, may have been soybeans, I don't recall. And I walked out there and I got right underneath it.
Oh.
And there was this deafening silence,
Mm.
just like I experienced in Veracruz and later
Hmm.
in the south of France. There was this deafening silence. And then there was this almost resonant sound. It was like have you ever listened to the Schumann resonance? The
Hmm.
idea, okay, it was something similar to that.
Hmm.
And
That's
this
like
thing,
7 hertz. It's around 7 hertz.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, so what I was doing was I was standing there, and I couldn't determine if it was 10 feet above my head or 1,000 feet above my head. It would just seemingly move. It was spatially out of, and there was this glow. It
Was it
changed.
solid or was it light?
No, it was solid,
Like a
but
solid.
this thing was solid, but it changed the colors. It undulated, reds to sort of a blues. Opalescent is what if
Mm.
talk about gemstones. I mean,
Mm.
it was very opalescent, but this is also interesting.
Mm.
The light source did not illuminate anything around me.
Hmm.
And wow.
It's almost like you were in a dimension with it, but that dimension was
Yes,
not shared by the area around you.
Hmm.
exactly. And so many, many years later, I would experience something with what do they call it? A life after life experience.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I was I have, as you know, I have this mark of Cain, as they say here, and what been through a lot. What did they say that Cain they no human could kill Cain? Isn't that what it was? But I don't. But I've been through a lot, and I've survived a lot, and by the grace of go I. But in that experience, I had the same soundlessness and that same feeling, and I felt that I was dissipating. I felt when I was up there that I was just, I was like nebulous, and I was just sort of dissipating in the
Hmm.
air.
Hmm.
And I
I
and
think
I
a lot
was
of near death experiences share that same uh or the people report that a similar experience of kind of, moving through a wall,
Ego dissolution in
Yeah,
the
bingo.
extreme. Yeah.
right.
But isn't that the goal of initiation?
It's one of the goals, yeah, but then to bring your ego back so you can function in the world is the sort of the bodhisattva path, right? So you
Yes.
have the discovery, but you have to come back so you can function.
So I would, going back to what you were saying, Julia, about the idea that what you experienced was initiation at the wall in Jerusalem. And
Yeah.
you received a commission at that point to
Yeah.
bring this into the world.
Yeah.
And therein lies what I would like to describe sometime with you as the grand intent of the Templar order that was suspended in 1307, but continues, those traditions continue to this day.
Wow.
And that's something I think we're almost out of time, but I would really, really be delighted to discover more about this stuff with
Well, I
both of you.
spent a couple of summers down in Carcassonne.
Oh, there's where the
Uh,
last experience
yes,
was, but this
well,
time they had entities.
when you said the south of France, I kind of knew where you were going. It won't surprise, I don't think, our listeners that to my knowledge, I have never had an experience like that. I'm always tethered. It doesn't mean that I don't have deep um, spiritual, emotional, compassion, empathy, awareness, moments of that because I've had that multiple times. Most recently, this Sunday at the picking circle. Julia knows the reference, but I have never had that kind of experience. And I've been, been to that church. I've been to Rennes-le-Château, whatever that place is called.
Okay, the
Uh,
place that this occurred was not in Rennes-le-Château, but I'll tell
uh-huh.
you that where it
But
was.
yes,
I'll go there.
and the last thing I'll say, because I know we are at time, is that's where Nostradamus is from.
Exact.
And we did a tour of all the villages around there. And we get to this one village that's overrun by cats. I mean, the people
Oh,
still live
how
there, but
wonderful.
cats are just everywhere. And our tour guide says people believe this is actually where Nostradamus lived because it's the only village he never talks about. in all of his writings. So their deduction is that he did not on purpose talk about where he lived.
Mm.
So that was fun, but it did not elucidate any feelings.
Well, it'll be interesting. I can't wait to get together and talk. But also, John, this is even this conversation is
Yeah, it was
very
great, and clearly
wonderful.
we can do a part two.
I'll do whatever. I am
Yep.
just so grateful to both of you. And again, that meeting at Frana's, I resonated. Carmen, I have copious notes
Uh-huh.
from everything that you were saying. In fact, I have
Oh,
notes for today. I have notes for today, but I would like to, if there's about a minute, I'd like to
please.
read something to you, and you can choose to include or this. But to oh, and by the way, you know the 36 Zedekim,
Yeah,
Julie,
The Zodiac, yeah,
this
yeah.
is
Oh,
the
the
36.
people that are hanging around
The
Yeah,
Lamadovniks, the
as
like
kind of
Lamadovniks.
exactly.
portals to
As
some
opposed to
other
beatniks, right?
knowledge we
Yeah.
need.
So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think in the book of the Apocalypse, they talk about the 72 and
Mhm.
36, and 36 is 72. And of course, 18, which is, it's
Hi.
gematria. It's
Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah.
So anyway, so here's something, and this is a product of this tradition that I have been a part of for many years. It says everything is possible. Everything is possible sounds beautiful, but is it truly achievable? The greatest obstacle to infinite possibilities is paradoxically the current structure of human society, science, culture, and fundamental concepts. Why is that? Because of the limitations imposed upon us through these very concepts. The perception of both the individual and the human race is restricted by the laws of science, culture, social structures, and everything that constitutes modern reality. Is genuine human progress possible? Progress that entails a true evolution of mankind, an evolutionary leap, both biological and spiritual, a fundamental and complete evolution, not just the advancement of tools that humanity uses to compensate for its deficiencies, but an actual transformation that surpasses the constraints of perception? Yes, a real and unique evolutionary leap for humanity is possible, but it requires a comprehensive and irrevocable transformation of both the individual and the entire human race. It demands the dismantling of all limitations that shape our perception and the narratives that have governed us for millennia. This transformation, which could be called a rebirth of the world, presupposes the use of specific tools and procedures that enable the transition of each individual and all of existence into an entirely new environment. A new perception, one that embodies infinite possibilities without restrictions or limits in any form, scientific, cultural, societal, or social. If you ever questioned the nature of reality and the world around you, you have likely encountered the ultimate boundaries set by scientific, cultural, religious, and other limitations, an endpoint that appears to be the only possible solution, beyond which no further explanation or potential exists. However, the very concept of infinity negates these limitations, opening the door to something that, from our current evolutionary standpoint, can only be defined as nothingness. Beyond these ultimate limitations, there exists nothing, and it is within this nothing that the answer to our question lies. There's the womb, it's the matrix.
Mhm.
Everything is nothing, and precisely because everything is nothing, everything is possible. This one simple sentence completely eradicates all restrictions, particularly those hindering social and scientific progress. The result will be a new society, a new humanity that through this transformation will be both individually and collectively ready for a true and complete biological and spiritual evolutionary leap forward. This leap, which has already begun for certain individuals, brings about a transformation in perception and understanding of the invisible world that exists around and within us. This world operates under different laws and principles, unrestricted by any other constant. The phrase, I have seen the world around me, will be replaced with, I have felt the world within me
Mm.
and the world around me. I have felt, feel. Don't tell me what you think, tell me what you feel. What machines will enable this process? There is no machine. There is only a group of individuals known as humanity. Humanity is the only machine capable of executing and completing this process. But this is only possible under the condition that humanity undergoes a complete transformation within itself, becoming a generator of the energy necessary to create from nothing or emptiness, the essential material, the keystone, the fifth element, which allows and facilitates both material and spiritual evolution. Each individual builds themselves in their own progress, embedding it into the collective vessel of the keystone's accumulation. This would be the only meaningful advancement of humanity since its inception. How is this process guided? The process is guided by individuals who have already initiated their own internal transformation. Individuals have begun transforming their environment, society, science, and culture through precisely divine principles applied to both to themselves and to others. The key factors and formulas are not mathematical. They pertain to humanity itself and to the community. They manifest as eternal transformers, such as, for the purpose of this project, the meanings of these virtues may not fully align with their conventional interpretations, but here they go. Faith, hope, love, justice, wisdom, courage, moderation, balance, and control. Together, when applied and blended correctly, these elements form what could be called the Holy Grail, the essential catalyst that enables the transformation necessary by synchronizing humanity to the point where the transition into a new dimension of human existence begins. You spoke to the new dimension of humanity.
That
Julia.
is beautiful. I have to
it
go to
goes
my,
on.
That's
yeah.
beautiful, and I think love is one of the
love
keystones there.
Universe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I nattered on, but I wanted to share.
No, it's
it
great.
was beautiful.